Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy in 2020 and say a few words about the economy in 2021 as well. Quick introduction. My name is Jay Shavit. I just launched this new publication called Econ Weekly in January, and I hope you'll check it out and consider subscribing. We discuss topics pertaining to the U.S. economy, um, everything from updates on companies and markets and sectors, and even a little bit of history, government policy. We think you'll find it helpful. I previously, for 16 years, I was the publisher of an industry newsletter called Airline Weekly. That's still in print. It's now published by my old colleague Madhu Unnikrishnan. You can go check that out if you're still in the airline industry. And this is sort of the same idea, but for the economy as a whole. Let's get right into it. So a quick summary, let me move myself over here. Quick summary of 2020. If I had to use one word to describe 2020, I'm going to choose good. It's not really too much more descriptive than that, but unemployment pretty low, inflation low, financial conditions good. The GDP growing at about 3.5% in the second half of 2019, which is pretty favorable. Remember that when you're talking about a $21 trillion economy, 3.5% is a big number. So there's things are pretty much going on all cylinders going into 2020. And that was generally true for the first month or two of 2020 as well. However, as we all know, in mid-March, we had this nasty virus, and that threw everything off the rails. Now for Q1, the GDP of the United States contracted by about 5%, but the real damage was seen in Q2, where you had this massive economy contracting by almost a third, which is almost hard to imagine. But as you know, there was a lot of businesses that were closed. People just couldn't go out to restaurants, they couldn't travel. There was just so many things you couldn't do, which explains the huge drop. Unemployment reaches 15% in April. That was the peak. And then things start to turn around, or at least stabilize would probably be a better word. And in Q3, which is the summer quarter, we have growth really bouncing back by really by a third. Now, because of the math, it didn't quite, we're still behind where we were before the crisis began. And overall in 2020, the economy is actually about 4% smaller than it was in 2019. So a really rough year. Why did things stabilize in the summer? Well, things began to reopen. Some rules on restaurant openings, just for example, started. It was a relaxation. There were some more people going on airline trips, and there was also a lot of adaptation in the economy. So companies kind of learned to deal with this. We had we all got used to video calls and whatnot. So there was a lot of adaptation. And now, unfortunately, during the winter, with the virus getting worse and lockdowns being reimposed, the economy not so great. Now, we did have a stimulus that was a huge stimulus in March. A lot of the provisions from that wore down by about September. So from September through December, you had some of the government support for the economy waning. However, there was another $900 billion program, or let's call it fiscal stimulus, injected into the economy in very late December. So we should be seeing that filter through the economy right now. So we'll see how Q1 develops. I put this slide in just to show you, just to give some perspective on the largest parts of the economy. Now, this is just keep this in perspective. When we say housing is the largest part of the economy, of course, if you look down at number 7, the Federal Reserve banks and the banking sector, of course, they interact with each other. The banks are lending, doing mortgage lending. So these are not distinct entities. All these things in the economy interacting. But this is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They put together, they kind of divide GDP into the different sectors. This is what they've come up with. So housing, you can just see, is just so massive, and it makes sense. I mean, it's probably the biggest purchase. It is the biggest purchase that most Americans will undertake during their lives, and it involves not only a large amount of money, but just think of all the people involved. It's the buyer, it's the seller, it's the mortgage bankers, it's the real estate agents, and then you can even, I mean, this category doesn't include this, but when you're talking about housing, you're also talking about all the things you need to do to furnish the housing. So all the furniture stores. If you go, this is interesting. If you go to an economy where the housing market is very robust, think of like South Florida, for example, and just drive around, and you'll see just how much is related to the housing. I mean, you'll see just so many of the stores or furniture stores. There's real estate agents everywhere. There's real estate lawyers everywhere. There's mortgage brokers everywhere. Just huge industry. I'll say just a quick word about state and local governments also. This one is somewhat underappreciated, I think. We all talk about the politics of the federal government, and that gets all the focus for good reason. But state and local governments are they're just hugely massive, and it's unfortunate that that we don't pay too much attention to what's going on at the local government level. I'm guilty of that as well. Trying to provide a little bit of assistance in that area with Econ Weekly, but the point is the state and local governments just employ so many people. You think about the hospitals, the schools, the court system, the police officers, firefighters, waste management, most of that stuff, not all, most of those jobs are state and local government jobs. It's just massive. Okay, next, we'll move forward. Stock market, I won't really talk about much. The details you can read on your own, and as I'll do with a lot of these slides. It's for you to go through, and please ask questions. Email me questions if you have any, or give me a call. But the key takeaway is that it just was a very, very good year, contrary to what you might think for an economy that was contracting so sharply. What are the reasons why? A real big one up top here is the government stimulus. Clearly, with the Federal Reserve creating so much new money, and with Congress also pumping so much new money into the economy, a lot of that money found its way into not just the stock market, but also the debt markets. And you can go on just about every market. I mean, there's just, we call it, you've heard it referred to perhaps as the everything rally. I mean, just everything is going up. Example of asset inflation. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? That's kind of another big topic of discussion, but we'll perhaps get to that a little bit later, or certainly something that we talk a lot about in Econ Weekly. The labor market, the unemployment has come down from its peaks, but it's still definitely elevated from where it was. If you see down below that K-shaped recovery, and you can just imagine, what the shape of a K is with part of it going up and part of it going down. Here is actually, before I go to the next slide, I'll just see that she session. I should probably explain that. If you remember back to the 2008-2009 recession, which was really a big housing bubble, which caused a big financial sector distress, some people call that a man session because so many male-heavy jobs Think of, construction. Um, that one comes to mind. A lot of those jobs were wiped out. And in this case, a lot of teaching jobs and certain health sector jobs, nurses, for example, a lot of things are traditionally female have been hurt. So we sometimes call it a she session. We also say that because the fact that children have been at home, we has put a lot of pressure on mothers in particular. Obviously, every family is different, but it does seem to have a disproportionate impact on females, mothers in particular. This slide is absolutely incredible, and it will really it speaks a lot about what's going on in the market. Okay, moving on. Some winners, anything to do with homes just did great. And big tech, I mean, some of that is partially having to do with homes too. So if you look at, social media, well, people are on their mobile phones at home all the time. Now ordering stuff online, they're streaming videos at home, they're working from home. So they're video comps, they're playing video games at home. So a lot of this is, you can say winners of the crisis, anything that benefits from people spending more time at home. And then we talked a little bit about, how all these asset prices are rising. Of course, if you're, a money management company like Vanguard or BlackRock, you're seeing just all this new money looking for, a place to invest. So those certainly beneficiaries as well. Now there are certain commodities. Oil, for example, is probably the most economically important commodity in the U.S. or in the world. The oil the oil companies are hurting. Now it was a complete collapse in oil prices in the springtime, right when the crisis, the beginning of the crisis. Things have recovered actually quite well in terms of like the oil price. Of course, these big oil companies, think Exxon, Mobil, Chevron. These companies have been dealing with some other issues as well, not just the low price of what they sell, but also just the shift to alternative energy sources and the move away from the hydrocarbon economy. That's sort of a long-term shift that is very challenging for companies like Exxon and Chevron, which in fact I read this morning that they are considering merging. Losers, restaurants and bars, any kind of travel companies, airlines, hotels, clothing and apparel. Interesting, people are not, buying as many clothes because they're staying at home. They're not going to the office as much. I remember writing in Econ Weekly a few weeks ago that deodorant sales are way down. I guess you don't need to smell good if you're not leaving the house. Hopefully you don't have people within the family that's close by. But anyway, state and local governments, they've had definitely issues. The federal government has provided some measure, but not as much as many would like, some measure of relief. State and local governments, unlike the federal government, they can't print money. They can't, they often have balanced budget restrictions. So it's been a lot tougher. Different states, are in better position than others, but it's really affecting all states. Universities too. I'll speak a second about that. Some of that is, just the fact that they've been closed, but also there have been, some alternatives. For example, some people getting, kind of short certificates instead of full 4-year degrees. There's some online courses that are emerging. Won't go through these, but you could look at I tried to highlight, a few of the key sectors in the economy. One thing we try to do in Econ Weekly is we really try to pay attention to the big movers and shakers. We talked about how big housing is. Now, health is divided up in that chart I showed earlier, is kind of divided up into different categories. But if you include everything that has to do with health, that might be the biggest. Be interesting to, someone to do a different categorization, but health is everywhere. It's about 17% of the economy, and it's growing. And I encourage you to read a lot about what we write about the healthcare sector, because it's there are aspects of it that are very, very challenging for the U.S. economy and even the U.S. government and its fiscal position going forward. Very important. Obviously, finance, critical, energy, retail is a huge sector with consumers representing like 2/3 of the economy. So I just spotted a few trends there. Some other key industries as well. I'll note with real estate, there's been a trend for many decades. Americans have been moving basically south and west. It's a Sunbelt move. Various reasons for that, not just the sunshine, but also, land tends to be abundant and cheap there. Sometimes businesses like to go there because the regulations are less, unions are fewer, different reasons. But there are a few real big, like superstar Sunbelt economies that are emerging. A lot of them are, heavy in information technology businesses. One of them is Austin. That's probably, the prime example. Austin's just booming beyond, anything you can imagine. Raleigh, Durham, Seattle is huge, obviously home of Amazon and Microsoft, and who else is there? Costco and Starbucks and Boeing. I mean, just a real hot economy. Although Boeing's not doing so great, but that's another story. And Nashville's another one. Big urban centers, San Francisco and New York, are actually right now seeing a lot of outflows. We'll see if that persists. It's hard to say whether people will flock back once the COVID crisis subsides. Don't know. Florida continues to boom. Orlando's kind of a quietly emerging as an interesting tech hub as well. Could put that into the category with the Austins and Raleighs and Nashville's of the world. We talked already about government policy, about how you have Congress injecting fiscal stimulus, but also the Federal Reserve being very aggressive in ensuring that there's enough money in the economy, so that it's you're facilitating commerce and transaction. People can easily borrow from home to buy a home. They can easily, companies can easily borrow to keep themselves alive. I certainly saw this when I was covering the airline industry, where airlines were just borrowing just immense amount of money, and they were able to do this in part because interest rates are so low, in part because banks were so readily available to lend, and that's give the Federal Reserve some credit for that. Now, some people say this is all dangerous because it's going to lead to inflation. Maybe, we'll see. It's interesting that just throughout American history, from the very, very beginnings, Revolutionary War onwards, there have always been, one school of American thought that, we have to be extra careful about inflation. And then sort of another school of thought that, we have to do everything we can to avoid deflation. And that's an interesting debate. We've talk a lot about that in Econ Weekly as well. Okay, moving on. We're getting close to the end. More. You can take a look at that in your own. But trade policy, as you know, during the Trump administration, he was very aggressive about applying tariffs. We'll see if the Biden administration reverses that. Not so sure that that's definitely going to happen, but we'll find out. Competition policy, keep an eye on that, because Washington, members of both parties, in fact, seem intent on really giving these big tech companies a hard time as far as, maybe they have too much market power. Maybe we should break them up. We've already seen lawsuits against Facebook. Not just the federal government, by the way, but state governments as well have been going after them. Facebook, from what I hear is that seems to be the one that's, number one in line to get broken up. But you hear talk about Apple, Amazon as well, Google. All right, when we're talking about, what technologies might reshape the economy and change the way we live in the future, here are some. The mRNA is interesting because, it's arguably saving the world. It's going to save the world. But apparently there are applications beyond just COVID vaccines, which could be very interesting. There are, I'm not an expert, but from what I know, there are a lot of advances in life sciences in general. And certainly, you know, artificial intelligence and the reason why something like artificial intelligence is so potentially transformative is that it can apply to every industry. You know, every company can find a use for it, you know, just to make better use of data. So these are some, you know, future things to think about. There's another interesting debate we've discussed about, you know, productivity and whether or not it's something that will increase, decrease in the future. There was a famous book written a couple of years ago by Robert Gordon. Some of you, you know, probably have read it. And his whole thesis was that, you know, all the real transformative technologies that have happened already. You know, nothing changed the lives of Americans or the way the American economy works, like electricity and air travel and you know, the internal combustion engine. I mean, all this running water, even, you know, just all the people having running water in their homes, just these like refrigeration, incredibly transformative. He says now, like a lot of the technology is the things are happening, like revolutionary in communications and even, you know, things like, you know, just the way we entertain ourselves and video games and things like and the music. But there's other people who think he's completely wrong, and something like you know, next generation energy is going to completely radically transformative. So I don't know. Definitely do keep an eye on energy, because energy technology has, you know, the oil just shapes so much about how the economy works today. So if we do get off of oil, if we do become sort of an economy of batteries and solar energy and wind energy, which it's becoming, you know, more and more likely that that's going to be the case, given the, you know, how those technologies are evolving and how much investment is going in them, electric cars, for example. That is definitely something to watch. So I'll leave you, you know, with some questions. I won't go through them, but you can read them on your own. Here's some more questions. Now, if you have, let me move myself out of the way here. If you have any questions, please do email me. That's my address there. And please visit our website. I hope you found this presentation useful. And if so, if I get good feedback, you know, we'll do more of these and on different topics. And I hope everybody has a great day and enjoy. Thanks. Bye.